when Jesus says, "Come to me when you're weary, I will give you complete rest, physical rest, mental rest, spiritual rest, creative rest, whatever the rests are. I am the one who gives you permission to rest." So even when your boss doesn't give you permission, or even when the boss in your brain doesn't give you permission,
true.
the upper management of God himself says, "I trump them all and I grant you permission to rest."
My name is Caroline, and I'm a counselor.
My name is Brett, and I'm a pastor.
And together, we're tackling difficult topics from a biblical perspective.
Welcome to There We Said It.
Here we are, we're back.
Hello, everyone.
So, I'm working on my voice today. It's all good.
Doing your best, was it like Stevie Nicks impression?
Yes, you're like the second
growly
person. I think my husband said that to me too. He's like, I don't mind the Stevie Nicks. So we'll see how long this lasts.
Yeah.
I tried to not talk for the last 2 days.
How'd that
Try
go?
being the key word.
I was going to say, as a biblical counselor with a full schedule, how'd that go?
I think I talked more. I did have to cancel a couple people. I'm sorry if it was you, but I tried my best.
At least you can know, if you're watching this, that she is actually afflicted with a legitimate
I didn't just flake on
laryngitis-y type of thing that's going on.
Right.
So that's been going around.
I think some of my clients might have been happy, like, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to listen to her today. Like,
they're like, I don't have to do my homework and
I don't
deal
have
with
to
my
feel
deeper inner stuff today.
Yeah,
Right.
They just got to chat the whole time.
Oh, I know this feeling.
Yeah. So going into that, we're laughing when we come on here because I'm a cheerleader. I was a cheerleader through junior high and high school. And so things still bring up cheers. Like we were just saying, it was hot in this room because it's a teeny tiny room. And then I break out in cheer for everybody.
Yes.
I was MC Crusaders. Woohoo!
Which we were inspired by your cheers.
Yes, they're always inspired. Sometimes I'll even get up and do a little kick, but I got the clap still down. And then Brett informed me. So this is like our get to know you of the day. I was a cheerleader. Brett has a whole cheer about him. I mean, I have a song about me.
You do.
So
you have a whole song.
The
Nobody
world,
writes a song about Brett. I mean, it's like the worst, like, one syllable name ever.
The world knows my song, and I think it's time for them to know your cheer.
Yeah. Well, so, okay. We were talking about this. I was like, well, I don't want this to come out like braggy and weird, but we were talking, just joking, before any of this went on the internet. But we were talking about Caroline was obviously a cheerleader. I was an athlete, so I played football, baseball, basketball in high school. And in high school and football, the crowd developed a cheer for me when I was on the field. I did not solicit this cheer, but they came up with this cheer. So my last name is Dode. And one day a couple of my buddies started this thing. They started saying, Doe-Ode, Ode. And then it just like caught on. And so then, like, if you can imagine, there's probably over 1,000 people at the game. Everyone starts chanting this. It becomes this really weird moment when you're like a junior, senior in high school, and it probably made my head a little bigger than it should have been.
Probably.
But, it's just one of those weird things you look back on and you're like, that was actually kind of a cool little moment in life. So I think about that now when I go to like my son's name or games. I think about different ways to like start little things for him. And his name is Jetson. We call him Jet most of the time. And so we're just trying to think of different things. And
how come you haven't brought in the Dode one?
I don't know.
Man, you should just start chanting
it. It's not time
it
yet. I don't know. It might puff up his head too big, and he's got to get there first. That took me a minute to get there. So
like we're checking his spiritual temperature before we throw in something
we're like let's
that.
just make sure the kid can handle it, because I went off the deep end after high school and had to come to Jesus at the low end there.
Gotcha.
So let's hope he doesn't have to. As I shared in our last episode, there was plenty of lessons that I learned on the deep end, far from God. So.
Right? Haven't we all?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that we know we've both got some cheerleader in us.
Yes.
Mr. Dode. I hope that now next time you all see him, you chant that. So rewind, listen to it over and over again, memorize it, and let's make it a thing.
Just start chanting, Jesus Christ, Savior.
Wow.
Jesus
Wait, did you just come up with that on the fly?
Just right now, man.
Nice
I don't
job.
want the glory, give him the glory.
Nice job.
Old is new, man. Let's go.
All right, so today we're doing a deep dive.
Yes.
We're going back into one of the topics we've already talked about, but we're going to kind of hit it from a different angle. And so we're talking about burnout again.
Yeah.
So the last time we talked about burnout, we talked about, it was almost kind of like bringing the burnout upon yourself in a sense, right? Where you're saying yes to everything. And so now I'm doing too much and I need to figure out what to take off my plate. And so you brought in the making a list of what is good and what is excellent.
Yep.
And then starting to scratch off your list, which we've got a lot of feedback on that of people who have done that. And like, it's been a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a powerful tool, right?
Yeah.
But that's only one aspect of burnout. That's the burnout that you brought upon yourself.
Yeah.
Then there's this other element of burnout that is like the burnout that gets heaped upon you, and maybe you don't have a lot of say in that burnout. So what's a couple examples of that, Caroline, that you've been thinking of?
Well, I think this majorly happened and came about, and burnout became, I don't want to say popular, but more well-known through COVID, especially for those of us who were essential workers. Both my husband and I were essential workers. He's in the food industry. Obviously, I'm in the mental health industry. So neither one of us stopped working through all of the years of COVID.
Yep.
Our work just looked different. We both came home and had to work from home, and all three of our kids came home.
Right.
And so we had a special needs daughter who no longer had her day program that needs 24/7 care. My middle daughter, it was her senior year of high school.
That stinks.
So she had that senior shutdown of like no prom, even though we had a prom dress, no graduation, none of that. And then my son, who was in third grade at the time, brought a computer home and we were supposed to homeschool him.
Yeah. Now you get to be the teacher, right?
Yes. Yes. And so it did not take long for us as a couple to experience burnout. I mean, we were just exhausted because we were doing the job of a million people now.
Yeah. Yeah. We were in a very similar situation. The church was a little bit different. So where the state of California deemed the church unessential in a terrible twist of
Right.
What a terrible thing that was, and how the church was shut down. So there was, in a sense, pastors were told to stay home, and some did. And then there was pastors like, our team, where we stayed active in ministry from the very get-go, trying to be wise to what was going on in the times. But we stayed out there ministering to people the whole time. And so, like you, having 4 kids, they all came home too. My daughter Jovi was home the whole time. She's young.
Yeah.
But the rest of the boys came home, and like you said, they brought their laptops. And my son, my middle son, has some learning challenges as well, and he has tutors during the day and people who help him do better. And so now it's like heaped on Sarah's lap, and I was in and out because I was not always in the house.
Yeah.
But she was, and man, talk about just a frazzled time of emotions and frustrations and all kinds of things under the sun. Yeah. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today.
Right.
If you were in that camp or a similar camp, or maybe you're in a camp like that today, and it's not just COVID, because COVID, magically disappeared now, so it is what it is. But it can also be like, maybe you're in a job where you're doing the work of 4 people, and you've tried to say like, hey man, like I need to either get out of this role or separate my role, and your boss is like, hey, don't worry about it, we believe in you, and you're underpaid and you're overworked, and you're like, I'm gonna freak out soon.
Yep.
This is for you.
This is for you. And then also, like, let's go to single parents.
Yeah.
Right. And some single parents, there's many different reasons why you could be a single parent, and sometimes you have the help of the other parent, but sometimes there isn't the help, and you are legitly a single parent, and you're raising kids by yourself, and you're still having to work maybe more than one job to make ends meet, and you're feeling burnout, and there's like, what do you do? Yeah. What do you do? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Just a reminder of what burnout is. It's an emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So again, sometimes we bring the stress on ourselves, and sometimes the stress is just heaped right onto us by others. So again, we've talked about some of the main causes of burnout, the lack of control, like the work situation, right? You don't have a say in decisions that affect your job or your life. You don't have a say in your schedule. If you have kids, you don't always have a say in your schedule.
Right.
They have to be at school at a certain time. They have to be picked up at a certain time.
Yep.
Sports, we want our kids to do sports.
Right.
You don't always have a say of when practices are.
Truth.
And I don't know, this might ruffle feathers, but I know some people might say, well, then take your kids out of sports.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for our children's mental and physical health, I think sports are really good.
Yeah.
And unless you're like doing a million of them and it's taking up every single night and every single weekend, I don't think that is necessarily going to help.
Yeah. That's good wisdom. And I think there's this culture that is in that world a little bit that's like, and you know, if it's you, right? Like you're spending $15,000 a year on travel expenses. You're literally gone all the time.
Yeah.
You're never home. I've heard this from people before, you know, like, well, you know, we play travel league, so we won't be in church for a couple months. And it's like, you're literally going to disconnect from your church for a couple months to go play softball. And that doesn't mean softball's not important. It's like very important, but like so is being part of a community of faith and being with believers and hearing God's word. And it's like, I know you're not discipled enough to like feed yourself out there on the road. Like, you know, what are you doing? So then they come back, they're like, I don't know, I really backslid. And it's like, maybe it has to do with a little bit of proximity. So like, I agree, balancing that out as an athlete who truly benefited from sports my entire life. I think I am who I am today because I was involved in sports. There has to be that wisdom of the tension. And so I think that's a good point of being able to weigh that out. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. Some other things that cause burnout, that we just kind of what we just talked about, high pressure work environments or home life, you know, home life might mean more than just COVID in your kid's home or whatever. It could be, you know, maybe your marriage is suffering. Maybe you have aging parents and they're suffering and you're having to help out with them. Maybe you have a kid with a special need or a kid with a health issue and stuff. There's so many things that can bring stress into your home life that can cause you to feel burnt out.
For sure. I definitely know we saw an uptick in people we were talking to during COVID whose marriages were not like really bad, but they were starting to bend. And COVID just like fast tracked that whole situation because they were around each other all the time.
Right.
And so like they went from like a 3 to like a 7 on the scale of like, we're going to kill each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we saw that a lot.
And I think I mean, some people might say that's the bad part of COVID, but I think it was the good part of COVID. Because people were left with nothing to do, but either communicate with their spouse, well, to communicate with their spouse if they have one, and to be alone with their thoughts, right? We get in this hustle bustle world because we want to shove down what we're feeling. We don't want to deal with all the junk. And so we just keep going, and we add stuff to our plate. And then COVID was like this wall that they hit. And all of a sudden, oh gosh, I have to think about that.
Wow.
I had the space and I had the time. And so people think it was COVID that damaged people's mental health. Yes. And COVID also revealed the mental health issues people already had.
Yeah, that's good. It pulled back the covers a little bit, didn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's true too spiritually. You know, I think it just pulled back those covers spiritually to figure out like, how important is this rhythm of rest, of being in the Word, of pursuing the spiritual disciplines, of pursuing a relationship with Christ past just I go to church and I do a thing, but like, how does this translate into a real walk with Jesus when you go through these circumstances? You find out pretty quick, like how close you are or how distant you are. I guess the good news is that, you know, with Christ, there's always this invitation to come near. Yep. You know, even if it feels like our relationship is distant, his response is come near. Yep. So then what additional kind of tools can we give those who are experiencing burnout today, who maybe didn't ask it upon themselves or didn't say no to enough things, but they're in this season like you explained? What kind of tools can we give them today?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say get rest. And I know people are probably going to roll their eyes and be like, I don't have time for a nap. And rest is more than just a nap. Yeah. Right? Right. There's physical rest, which could mean a nap, but it could also just mean I'm going to sit down. Yeah. I'm going to sit down. Do you need to watch some TV for half an hour? Yes, I said it. It's okay. Don't check out in front of that TV and stay there for days, but stop and just take some rest physically. Take some rest emotionally, especially if you're in, you know, healthcare workers. That's an emotional job. Mental health workers, that's an emotional job. So take some time away from that emotional and rest that and do something fun where you don't have to think.
So maybe it's just like get away from the people component and go to a walk in nature or paint a canvas or play music or do something that you don't have to carry the burdens of somebody else.
Right. Or if you have friends that you like to hang out with and you know they're not going to like put all their emotional back, or you could say, hey, I can't do the emotional right now. Let's just have fun. And they're going to do that. Social rest, which is what you were just talking about, right? If you're around people all the time, get some time alone to walk out in nature and get social rest. If you have a creative job where you're having to think and create things all the time, creative rest. So basically, like whatever it is that you do all the time that is adding that stress, take a rest from that. Do the opposite.
So it's like a Sabbath.
So it's like a Sabbath, right? If you have a job where you're working with your mind all week, you're going to Sabbath your mind. So Sabbath may look like, oh, I'm going to go out and have some fun and do something that doesn't require my brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. And if you guys aren't familiar with Sabbath, it's a very misunderstood concept. It, is often in the church is like, don't have fun, don't dance, don't sing, go to church twice on Sunday or else God's going to be mad at you. And that's not what Sabbath is. Sabbath is a gift from God who says, listen, work is good, but rest is essential, and we have to learn to rest. And so to Caroline's point, when Jesus said in Matthew 11, come to me, all you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, it isn't the idea that you're going to go lay down and take a nap on Jesus' leg, though that would be cool.
It would totally be cool.
And I do think there was times that they probably did grow weary from walking. And because it was hot and it was a different day and age and they weren't so crazy as we are, they probably did lay down under a tree and straight take a nap. Like it's very likely that happened and someone might have nuzzled up on Jesus' leg and just took a nap. However, to that point, when Jesus says, come to me when you're weary, I will give you complete rest, physical rest, mental rest, spiritual rest, creative rest, whatever the rests are. I am the one who gives you permission to rest. So even when your boss doesn't give you permission, or even when the boss in your brain doesn't give you permission, the upper management of God himself says, I trump them all and I grant you permission to rest.
I don't know how well that'll work with some people's bosses. Sorry, boss. God said to rest. Go.
Well, that's a great question. Like, how do you have that conversation? Because I've been in those situations where, and not so much in the ministry world, but before I was in ministry, I was in the business world, and there were all kinds of times where I felt like there was so much pressure to do and to perform and make sure that I'm always proving my worth to this company. I've had bosses that made me feel super anxious all the time, like I wasn't doing enough and I wasn't, performing enough. And there was a time where I remember I was a fairly new Christian, and so I thought this at this point was a little bit brave and a little bit insane. But I had told a sales manager who was always like badgering me, and like on a day off he'd always call me and be like, "Hey, did you call so and so?" It's like, "Hey man, it's my day off today. Like I didn't call anybody today." Well, if you want to really get up there and beat so and so this week and prove, it's like, well, if that's what it takes, then no, I don't. It's my day off. I am granted a day off by this institution.
Yes.
And you have to honor that.
Yeah.
Don't tell me to do things on my day off. It's my day off. So for me, it was a boundaries thing. And when I got a little more educated, I was like, hey, I've been looking at the employee handbook and I realized that you can't ask me to do things on my day off. Get a little lawyer on him, right?
There you go.
Then he was like, well, I was just trying to make a point about, trying to, help you out. And then he backed off because when I pushed back with something that was in paper and said, you don't get the right to do this, he drew back.
That's good.
So you might have to do that. If you have a boss that's crazy, you might have to go into your handbook and find a little paragraph and pull it out and say, hey, I was looking at this and it says right here, you can't do what you just did.
Yeah.
And then if they keep doing what they're not supposed to do, then bring it to whoever their boss is and say, listen, hey, I don't mean to, be a riffle here, but this seems to be outside of our company policies. Could you talk to them for me?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's good. Okay, so to start with, get rest, whatever that looks like for you, whatever that needs to look like for you. Second, get grounded. So grounding is a technique we use a lot in the mental health field because when you start to feel overwhelmed or out of control, you lose your space. You lose your here and now, right? You're thinking about, I got to do this, I got to do that. And so grounding is just a tool that we use to help get you centered and back in the present. And it's super easy. If you can, walk outside, take off your shoes, put your feet in something that feels good. Like if you can stand on the grass, that's the best. If you're inside, and stand on some carpet, or I'll stand on the cold tile in our bathroom, just so you can feel the earth under your feet. I feel like that's a song.
So it's like a literal grounding. Like,
it's a literal grounding.
Ground your feet into something on the ground.
Yep. And then look up, because what's up?
Yeah.
It gives us perspective.
Yeah.
And then once you're doing that, you're going to list things. You're going to like come to your senses. List things that you can smell, things you can hear, and things you can see.
Oh.
Right? So like, especially if you're in the grass, and things you can feel. I can feel the grass beneath my feet. I can feel the wind. I can hear the distant traffic. I can hear a bird. I can smell flowers. I can smell whatever, because, we live in the Central Valley. So you get a lot of smells here. And so you're just taking deep breaths, and you're getting your senses like back in control, back into centered. And then for me, I always give myself positive, I'm going to call them mantras, but in a positive way, where for me, I have to always say, the sky is not falling. God is still in control, and I'm okay.
Okay.
So whatever those positive things you need to hear, and I think reminding ourselves that God is in control.
Yeah.
God will never leave us nor forsake us.
Yeah.
God's got a plan, and just kind of repeat those to yourself, and it gets you back in your brain back to where it needs to be, and back focused on the here and now.
Oh, so I think about, okay, I'm trying to imagine myself doing that, and I don't know if I would ever like go stand in the grass, even though I love the grass.
Yeah.
But I wonder if this would be something that would qualify. So sometimes when I'm overwhelmed and burdened, I have this choice where it's like press forward and do, or stop and go take a walk. Mm-hmm. And when I'm at my best, like I'll stop and I'll just say, hey, I'm just gonna go take a walk around the block real quick.
Yeah.
And I do what you just said. Like I'll remind myself, hey, this day does not define my worth. Me getting this done does not define if I am valuable. God is in control. Maybe I'll pray scripture. Maybe I'll talk to God.
Yeah.
And then by the time I usually get back to, a couple trips around the block, I feel like I've created that mental space again to be grounded. So is that...
Yeah, totally. Because also what you're doing with a walk is bilateral stimulation. You're getting both sides of your brain functioning, working together, online again, back to where they need to be, which is kind of like what grounding helps do too. Okay. So then you get your focus back.
Okay.
And the brain.
So there's a couple ways to peel that apple. It's about kind of breaking out of that little space that's sedimentary and norm, and then you're going out and you're doing something different, and you're getting recentered.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
I feel that. That's
okay.
Good.
All right. So we got get rest, get grounded. You might need to get help. Whether that's like, if you can afford it, get help with cleaning your house, get help with the kids, get help with yourself. Do you need to see a counselor to work through the stress of some of this stuff? Whatever that help might look like for you, get help. Yeah,
that's good. And, if you are a part of a church, it's always just an easy step. It's often a free step is to contact your church and say, do we do pastoral care and counseling here? There's some things I'd want to talk about. I was just talking with a good friend this week, and we've been meeting and talking about some things. And I told him, I said, you know what, I've truly enjoyed this, and I think we're probably getting to the top of like where my professional capacity is going to be able to help you. Like, I still love you. I'm your pastor. We're going to walk together. Like, I'm not leaving you. But I'm also going to put your hand in somebody else's hand, because I really think they're going to be able to help you more. And I reached out to you, and I was like, hey, I need the number of somebody.
Yeah.
And so, and they were like, wow, thank you. And, we as a church want to help kind of meet those needs and make sure that finances don't get in the way. And so we even set aside a certain amount of resources that can be applied for to be able to help cover some of these costs, so that mental health services are not cost prohibitive, because a lot of times it's not always covered under somebody's insurance. Oftentimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. Right. And so it's one of those things where it's like, we want to put our money where our heart is and say, if we really believe in the whole health of people, then that's a good thing. And so, it might even be good to ask your church or your deacons. Often they have some oversight of the church budget, and just ask them, do we have any line items to help people seek help? And if we could help them, like, is there a process? And maybe God would touch your shoulder and say, hey, why don't you be the catalyst? Why don't you start that? And in the future, hundreds of
Yeah.
people are going to benefit from that simple little step you took, because I think churches need to be a part of this story, working hand in hand with counselors as well.
Right. And piggyback on that, as moms, some of you might be listening to this and like, well, I haven't experienced burnout. Maybe you have some spare extra time. Look around to maybe other moms or other families who you're like, but this sounds like them. I know they've been working nonstop since COVID, or here's a single mom. I bet she could use some help. And buy them some groceries and just drop them off. Take them a meal and just drop them off. Even if, it could be so easy
Drop 'em a gift card to DoorDash.
as just say, drop them a gift card to DoorDash.
Yeah.
I have a good friend who does that for people all the time. And I'm like, what a blessing.
It is.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can even be, I don't know if you know this, you can Instacart. I love Instacart. It's not a plug, but you can Instacart to anybody. So you could be like, I'm going to Instacart this person a meal from Costco, and it just gets dropped off the door. And you literally can do it from your phone or your computer.
Wow.
It's so easy in this day and age to help other people. Like, there's really no reason we shouldn't be doing it.
It's good. What about if someone's listening to this and they're like, I think I've experienced, or I'm experiencing burnout, but I have some bandwidth, and I want to just create a hub in my home or once a week at a coffee shop, and just say, like, I'm just going to invite people if they want to come and hang out for an hour and just kind of talk about life. It doesn't have to be super heavy or super clinical, but there's something to be said about like sharing your burdens with one another. And obviously not everyone has to be pastors and biblical counselors to do this well. But it's just kind of the intent of the heart to say, I'm going to make myself available and create space for God to move and use me or my home or my schedule. I think that's been a really helpful thing as well that I've experienced personally, and I know that others have gotten a lot of joy out of, just creating space. So there's another simple way that you can combat but also be proactive in helping others maybe walk out of burnout. Anything else as far as tools that would help?
I just think self-care can sound like a negative word, especially as a Christian. But I think as Christians and as human beings, you have to add yourself to your to-do list. That doesn't mean become self-focused or selfish, but take care of yourself. Notice these things if you're feeling burnout. If you want a good list of burnout symptoms, go back to our previous episode on burnout and get the list of symptoms. And if you see that you're experiencing burnout, pay attention to that and cut out some time for yourself to refuel. Because eventually you're going to be completely empty, and we can't pour from empty vessels.
And that's the truth.
And that's the truth. And there we said it.
And there we said it. Well, thanks again for joining us for another episode of There We Said It. It is always a joy to have you with us, and we are just grateful that you follow us on all of our social accounts. You can also follow us, of course, on YouTube. Check out There We Said It and search that. And if you have questions about who we are and just would like to talk with us more, get to know us more at therewesaiditpodcast.com.